Hey everyone, what's up? This is Uri for Gorilla Poker, and in this video I'm going to be reviewing some heads-up hands played towards the end of June between Kalapaju and Badge Corvin at 25.50 on PokerStars. Very interesting hands, so let's, without further ado, jump into it. So here Kalapaju raises to 115, Badge Corvin 3 bets to 550, and Kalapaju 4 bets to 1400. We're 127 deep. And just a small note about pre-flop sizings, because a friend of mine asked me recently, is pre-flop just solved and everyone knows exactly what they're doing all the time and they're all playing off of the same charts, and is it just super lame and boring? And the answer is not really, because at 127 deep, you're supposed to open raise a different size than 100 deep. And it's not the size that Kalapaju is raising, and he probably knows this. And what you can do pre-flop, most high-stakes guys will have memorized more or less one solution. And they still have holes in it for 6-mix, but probably not for heads-up. But you can play around with the sizings a bit, and if you change your sizing, suddenly the solution your opponent's memorized doesn't fit. Nobody can memorize all the solutions for all the sizes. Then we're just out of the memory game and into the poker game. So what happens when someone sizes smaller heads up? Generally, you need to call more and 3-bet less. That's the surface level adjustment. As your calling range gets wider, your stronger hands kind of have more value being there because you get barreled into more. But everything post-flop shifts around a bit as well. So we're really out of memorization territory. Not that I think Badge is one to memorize, but seeing this 115, this is already an exploit, like a blow is being thrown here and a statement is being made about strategy. Just so you guys know, in case you think this is all automatic. Badge 3-betting to 550 is a good appropriate size for the stack depth, and the 4-bet size I think is fine. Again, these increase as you get deeper, they decrease as you get shorter. There is a ton going on sizing choices that doesn't have a huge effect on win rate, but it has a cumulative effect on win rate. Like every hand, a small edge can be gained. So yeah, we have a 4-bet pot. There's 2,800 in the pot already, almost twice as much behind. 6-3-4 rainbow board. This is a board that misses the 4-better, but also misses the caller. So it's one of those boards where you can't c-bet everything because you have too many overcards, and if you start c-betting too much, your opponent just check raises whenever he has any piece. But you still have a big advantage with aces, kings, queens, jacks, and those hands are still very happy to get stacks in. So Badge checks. We have a 3rd pot c-bet and a call. Turn is the 5 of spades. I hope I'm not mispronouncing names, so Badge and Kala we're going to go with. Badge decides to donk bet for a bit under 1/3 pot, but I think a reasonable sizing, and gets called. And I'm going to pause here just to mention again, donk bets are not something you see very often. And the situations that kind of dynamic around donk bets is that the out-of-position player is supposed to have check-raised most of all of his strong hands on the flop, and then on a random turn, it doesn't make sense for him to start taking the betting lead. So the turn has to shift something with equities, and specifically with what is the nuts. So let's say the turn is a 9 or a 10. Aces, kings, queens, jacks are still going to keep betting, so Badge should check and let Calip take the lead, and there is no sense in him leading. But when a turn is a 5, this is a perfect example. 6-5 got there, 4-5 got there, pocket 5s got there, any gut shot with a 7 or a deuce got there. Not easy to have a deuce, but hands shift to the point where maybe if your opponent has kings, he isn't barreling a stack off anymore, and maybe you should be the one who's in charge of putting in stacks. And then you kind of imagine that the initiative has shifted. The out-of-position player now has the betting lead. and he can decide how to play his range out of position. So I think this is reasonable. I'm not 100% sure this is accurate for this specific case, because with shallow stacks, sometimes kings will just still get stacks in, and maybe solvers would raise all the cut shots or whatever. But I think the idea is very solid. So Badge bets, Kalapaju calls, and Kalapaju is going to have a tough time in the sense that most of his range is just going to be bluff catchers here. Jack of clubs on the river, Badge shoves, presumably something around 2 pair plus. For value, Kala calls, and we have a showdown with Badge Corvin showing down ace, queen off, which if we run through, always 3-bet, call the 4-bet, check all the flop makes sense, very strong hand, especially in heads up and 4-bet pots, and then decides to turn it into a bluff, which I think is reasonable. These are the kind of hands you're going to have to bluff with. You're generally not going to be bluffing with pairs, so anything that you floated the flop with is fair game. And Kalapaju shows down pocket tens, which on the surface looks crazy. Who calls down stacks with tens on a 3, 4, 6, 5 jack board? But since Badge Corvin is, very polarized, so 2 pair plus or air, it's a legitimate bluff catcher in terms of absolute hand strength. And if you think about what is Badge going to be bluffing with, and you say, hands that floated the flop, well, hands that floated the flop generally don't contain a 10. They're going to be hands like ace-queen or king-queen suited. So in that sense, pocket 10 seems like a fair hand to call with. I wouldn't be surprised. I think Kalapaju probably RNG'd the river call. He wasn't calling every combo of pocket 10s, but important to recognize in these spots kind of, my range is all bluff catchers. It's not a very big size. I'm going to need to call a lot of them. And then not be like, oh, 10s looks terrible, fold. Queens looks terrible, fold. You can't really do that because you'd be letting your opponent run you over. Unless, of course, you believe he's not really bluffing, in which case you definitely should do that. Okay, we'll keep this one short. Some interesting concepts shown in a hand. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if there are any specific hands you want me to cover. Probably going to do a few more hands from this match. There were some interesting ones here. Anyone in Vegas, enjoy Vegas. Good luck in the main event or any tournaments you may play. We have some guys from Gorilla Poker in Vegas wearing Gorilla Poker t-shirts, so feel free to say hi if you enjoy the channel. And yeah, like and subscribe to the channel, guys, as always. And see you next time.